All right, team, with the main video covering all of the patch notes out of the way, I figured I would give you guys kind of my summary of it and what I think, who won, who lost, that sort of thing. Firstly, let's talk about the winners. I think overall, Warriors by far came out ahead on this a lot. And I'll start with armor and fizz damage. Firstly, armor on all monsters has been reduced by 30%, so they're just going to deal more fizz damage overall. Additionally, the following bosses, so Olroth, Zesh, the King, and Arbiter Bash, they no longer have armor pen, meaning that your armor is going to be significantly more effective in terms of fighting bosses. If we go back to the beginning here, one of the very first lines regarding armor is fully broken armor now causes enemies to take 20% increased physical damage from hits. So just out the gate, we have 3 pretty significant buffs to fizz damage in armor, on top of the fact that Smith of Kitava will easily be one of the best Ascensies in the game, given its access to insane defensive layers that it looks like no other class will have access to. Additionally, I do think Titan just received buffs overall as well. I think the buff to Rolling Slam was actually very big, especially for clearing campaign, and this might even be like a legitimate mapping tool now, because with this increase in attack speed, it's going to make it a lot smoother and a lot quicker to get off, and it's going to allow you to get into your Bone Shatter much faster. And I do think Rolling Slam Bone Shatter is a very good screen clearing ability. On top of these changes, I just didn't really see any nerfs to a lot of the things that Warriors used. For example, you can't even find Bone Shatter in these lists. You can't see Earth Shatter either, so those are the 2 main abilities that I used. Warbringer received somewhat of a buff, at least the version of Warbringer that I used. I don't really know about Jade Form, to be honest, but either way, it still looks like it gives you the 10% passive fizz damage reduction, which I think is good enough. In addition to all these various little buffs here and there, Leech also was not mentioned on the patch notes, and I think Leech is still incredibly strong, especially for Warriors, because they're just kind of right on top of it. So once again, I still think that Warriors will be one of the biggest players, especially with Smith of Kitava. I think that they will be absolutely one of the best classes in the game by far. Another major winner, I think, in this is going to be Pathfinder, and this will really depend on how the concoctions are. Assuming concoctions didn't get gutted and they made him the unarmed thing and they made it harder to get flash charges, or made him cost more flash charges rather, and they made it so you can't use Widow Hell, that sort of thing. We'll have to see how this works out, but assuming that concoctions aren't gutted or anything like that, I do think Pathfinder received quite a host of buffs across the board. Having Relentless Pursuit and Running Assault swap, and if I recall correctly, Relentless Pursuit is like a full action speed immunity too. Like, you just cannot be slowed period by anything. So this is really nice. And then having Running Assault buffed, although I don't think that'll matter because of the horse. Getting Enduring Elixirs from 2 Ascendancy points as opposed to 4 will also be a massive buff. And then on top of that, they gain Sustainable Practices, which gives them 30% of evasion rating, grants elemental damage reduction, on top of being able to pick either an immunity to shock, ignite, or freeze. I think all these things in combination will really provide Pathfinder with a lot of options. And again, it gives them a defensive layer that we don't really see anywhere else in terms of having the immunity, having this immunity to slow, the immunity to one of these that you so choose, and then also having 30% evasion rating as elemental damage reduction. On top of these buffs to Pathfinder, bleed itself just seems like it's going to be kind of like the premier ailment of this patch. They seem to be talking a lot about it. They showcase a lot of gems about it. We have a new bleeding cluster, a couple of them it looks like at least. We have a new keystone for bleeding, and then on top of that, once again, it depends on how the concoctions are, but bleeding concoction now is 200% more magnitude of bleeding inflicted instead of 100. So it just looks like across the board, bleeding is going to be really strong. Another major winner in this patch, in my opinion, is going to be the Witch Hunter. Not only did Witch Hunter receive significant buffs to the damage of all crossbows, as well as the actual added damage mods being 2-handed versions instead of 1-handed, they also received just buffs to their Ascendancy in general. So with No Mercy, this received a 33% buff from 30% to 40%, and then Obsessive Rituals, it looks like Sorcery Ward received a 30% buff as well, going from taking half of your armor and evasion rating to only 35% of your armor and evasion rating. On top of this, Galvanic Shards looks like it received a buff as well, gaining a 50% buff to its conversion of physical damage to lightning, going from 40 to 60%. On top of all of this, the Witch Hunter itself survives the Herald nerfs by having an answer to the loss of Heralds with Zealous Inquisition. And while I don't think Zealous Inquisition is that great, I do think it is significantly better than having absolutely nothing, and I do think it pairs very well with Galvanic Shards. In addition to all of that, in one of the build diaries, I talked about how the Witch Hunter has a really strong build that I would think for League Start, and I think that that is even more true now. Getting the buffs to No Mercy and having absolutely 0 changes to Shock Burst rounds, it means the Witch Hunter doesn't have to worry about its single target being lost, which really is the big thing that it has to deal with, or contend with rather. And now you'll be able to start with something like Zealous Inquisition take Pitiless Killer and grab those Decimating Strike gloves, and you'll have 3 ascendancies as you go into maps, and you will just obliterate maps with a buffed version of the Galvanic Shards. You get 2 more ascendancies, and then eventually you'll have No Mercy, getting up to 40% more damage. And I think the Witch Hunter with the buffs to crossbows will absolutely slap early on. And again, it doesn't have to worry about its single target damage. I think it's just going to be one of the better classes in the game for sure, on top of the fact that with the buffs to Sorcery Ward, it might actually be able to build into something that's significantly more tanky than we saw prior to. One of the things I forgot to mention about the early setup as well is that with Pitiless Killer, if you take that helm, I think it's, I can't remember the name of it, but it gives you 100% increased effective Culling Strike, and then you can actually grab increased effect Culling Strike on the tree. Having 125% increased effective Culling Strike early on, in conjunction with Decimating Strike, Zealous Inquisition, and the buffs to the crossbow, and then later on eventually having No Mercy, you will have one of the smoothest mapping experiences. I am sure of that, without a doubt. On top of all of this, another thing that I forgot to mention is that with boss fights increasing in length significantly, Witch Hunters will actually have quite a big buff from Concentration. Concentration was useless prior to because you delete everything from existence, but now with Concentration, enemies have less cooldown recovery rate, up to 50%. That means in longer boss fights, the Witch Hunters will just take less damage, they'll have to dodge less moves, and this will ultimately be pretty beneficial across the board, assuming that we reach that point where boss fights actually take a significant amount of time. So once again, overall, I do think Witch Hunter is going to slap this league for sure. Another big winner that I am anticipating from these patch notes is going to be the Amazon. Not only did we not see anything mentioning accuracy or nerfs to accuracy of any kind, we also didn't see anything talking about infusions. Infusions are going to be very strong in this tree. Accuracy stacking is going to be very strong. These are the 2 kind of major building blocks of this character. Also, once again, I am a fiend for Leech, and I do think Mystic Harvest will be very good, although probably realistically Infused Avatar will be better to take, so you'll probably look something like, you know, going over here and then going over here. But that being said, regardless, I do think Amazon comes out very well here, particularly because we didn't really see any nerfs to the accuracy formula, accuracy stacking. I do think accuracy stacking will be quite potent on this character as well. Also, they're just kind of new. You know what I mean? And by virtue of being new, it's going to be really hard for them to be trash, I would assume, especially given they have 25 new skills. Who knows how much they tested this? Anytime anything like this comes out, it's probably going to be busted as fuck. So I would assume Amazon is also going to be a safe pick. And honestly, I don't care if it's not. I will be playing this no matter what. So this is another winner, I would say, as well. Before we get into the losers of this patch, I want to quickly note the characters I think will probably be okay. I'll mention Lich here because I don't know about Lich. I'm not going to comment on whether it's going to be good or bad or anything like that. So same thing with Tactician. I would recommend other creators for those sorts of things. I'm not really interested in those ascendancies. I'm assuming Lich is going to be busted as fuck, but just for the reason I don't know, I'll include it in this section. But I think things like Evoker will probably be fine. Infernalist, it's hard to say, to be honest. I think these will probably end up being losers just for the virtue of the fact that, like, I think spellcasting got a really nasty hit, and I think a lot of the things that made Infernalist good got nerfed to the fucking ground. So we'll just have to see how they come out on the other side. I think Deadeyes are probably gonna be fine. I don't really imagine them being any sort of worse, and that's probably all I can think of for classes that are probably gonna be okay. Maybe Chronomancer, I would include in that. I really just don't know anything about Chronomancer. Starting off with who I think are the losers of this patch, I don't think Ritualist is actually going to be bad, but I do think that these patch notes, particularly with the nerf to Ingenuity, really kind of hard shit on a lot of like the ideas behind Ritualist. Like, yes, you will have a 3rd ring slot, and that will be very good, and your Mystic Attunement in combination with an Ingenuity will still give you quite a bit of power from your rings. It's just not as quite as big of a oomph as we thought it was going to be. One of the things I will mention though is I do worry about the nerf to Ingenuity, just for the reason I think that the Ritualist kind of looks like a one-trick pony to me, where like everything went into the rings, and every single Ritualist will be taking the extra ring slot, right? Like, there is no such thing as a Ritualist who doesn't fucking take this, I think, right? It's really hard to pass up, especially given that you get 25% increased bonuses from all of them, on top of the fact you could pair that with Ingenuity, right? So that's kind of the thing behind it, is this seems very centric around the whole Ingenuity effect thing. So I think that being nerfed is going to be a bit rough. And then on top of that, I just don't really know like what else this essentially even offers. And I just think Ritualist honestly looks boring as fuck, especially if you're planning on fucking stabbing the ground every 30 seconds in a map. You are high, bud. You're gonna get 10 maps in before you start salivating at the edge of a fucking bridge. Moving on, one of the absolute biggest losers of this patch is going to be the Stormweaver. Of course, they received so many nerfs to their ascendancy alone, on top of the fact that mana stacking got absolutely fucking gutted. Mixottles, dream fragments, anything that you can think of, all the mana rolls and all the gear, all the percent mana rolls, a bunch of notables that once gave mana no longer do that, their own small passive for their ascendancy no longer give them increased max mana. Like, they got absolutely shit on in terms of mana stacking. And then on top of that, Archmage itself got absolutely gutted. I cannot see a world where I don't know what the fuck you're gonna build on Stormweaver's gonna be walking around with a bow. Okay, they're gonna be bow weavers at the end of this fucking patch because they are not casting spells. Holy shit. I want to take a moment to point out too, with things getting nerfed like the CI Ghost Wrath combo, the nerfs of Everlasting Gaze, all these different nerfs that came in to destroy kind of the defensive layers of casters, well, they didn't get anything in replacement, right? One of the reasons why casters were so strong is because they had access to the only defense in the game, which was big life pool, la ES. That was it. That was all they fucking did. I mean, even Infernalist lost 20% off Scooby fucking Doo. Like, I don't know how these classes are going to survive. And not only do we nerf every last single fucking defensive option that they have, on top of that, their skills got nerfed. Spark is destroyed. Arc is not even, you can't even look at it. Lightning Conduit got annihilated. Fire skills already sucked balls. Freeze got nerfed. Like, I have no idea, just for casters in general, what the plan is, okay? You have no defenses, you have nothing to help really boost ES in any like major way beyond hyper slotting into it. I don't know where you're gonna get damage from, etc., etc. I do think that casters far and away, spell casters across the board, got totally shit on in this patch. And I really, if there's something I'm avoiding, it's them for sure. On the topic of casters, I will also mention Blood Mage really quick. I just think Blood Mage is fucked. I think this new ascendancy is absolutely shit. Critical hits to ignore monster armor. Ugh, I just do not think that this can be good at all. I highly doubt that. I think Blood Barbs, this is almost kind of a nerf, because now what it means is that you have to have some form of like curse on hit in order to aggravate your bleeding. Like, I just, ooh, not only did they not get anything, they actually, I think, got slightly worse. So yeah, a Blood Mage, oof, you guys are fuck. Another major loser in 0.2 is the Gemling Legionnaire stat stacker. I think stat stackers just in general got a fat nerf across the board. Not only did spaghettification no longer grant 7% increased attributes, but now just gives you 13 to all attributes. They lost the scaling of ingenuity, which was a huge boost to their stats. Hands of Wisdom and Action, as well as Pillar of the Caged God, got absolutely shit on top of the fact that the armor from Arbiter of Ash that grants percent attributes is also gone as well. And then in addition to all of this, heralds themselves got nerfed, so they no longer get that big herald chain, which was really nice to have. I think overall stat stackers really took a massive hit this patch. There's a lot of other little stat stacking nerfs here and there, and yeah, I just don't think they're going to be viable. I don't really think they started off very well just in general, and then now having all these nerfs on top of it, in order to make one work, I can only imagine it's going to be an insane like mirror budget or something like that. Overall, I just think stat stackers really ate shit, and honestly, good fucking riddance. Holy shit. Fuck stat stackers. Thank you, GGG. This is a dub for this one, in my opinion. I still think Gemling Legionnaire will probably be fine. It's just a really good ascendancy overall, so it's hard to imagine it will be bad. On top of the topic of really OP builds, of course, all the Temporalis builds got absolutely gutted as well. Temporalis now has half of its top end for cooldown reduction, as opposed to, you know, what it was before, which was -4 seconds. Now it's -2. And then on top of that, we saw the nerf to Trample Toe, that infinite damage dogshit Trample Toe build. A lot of that got nerfed as well. Honestly, I don't know how I feel about the Temporalis nerf just in general, because now it's like, well, why even fucking do the no-hit? Why does it matter? So yeah, I think the Temporalis nerf, I'm not too big of a fan of it, but again, it happened, that's what it is. On the topic of Temporalis farming, the Acolyte of Chayula is the mouse who lost his cheese, and he can no longer cheese the Trials of Sekimas using his Darkness passive to prevent him from taking honor damage, and so he could use this as a pseudo barrier to get through one-hit runs, and he could actually take damage during those. This had to be nerfed no matter what. Of course, this could not stay in the game, absolutely. However, I do think Acolyte of Chayula needed significant treatment and buffs similar to the Blood Mage, and realistically, it did get some minor buffs, I suppose, to the Darkness change, and maybe this mana passive leech is a lot better, whatever, however you want to put it, but this is most certainly not enough, and I do think they are taking an L this patch once again. I believe the last ascendancy on the list is going to be the Infernalist. While I do think Infernalist did catch an L this patch, it might not be as bad as it seems. The reason why I'm putting them in the loser losers category. It's because I think losing the Hellhound 20% damage is kind of rough, but maybe this was never that good. They do retain the demon form infinite stacks things, which is nice. However, they lose out on things like Ghost Writhe and using that to scale their ES, and then using Ming's Heart further to reduce their life, and then that means that the percentage amount of life you lose per second from demon form was sustainable. Now it's a flat amount, which I do not believe will be nearly as sustainable, at least I'm assuming so. So they're gonna have to contend with this now. And then on top of that, they lost the Pyromantic Pact Ascendancy build where you just reduced all your mana, so that way you just had infinite mana, which was also really nice. And they also kind of saw a nerf to the dodge roll in demon form, which I think is lame as fuck just in general. They did receive some buffs to some other things, and maybe Bringer Flame is really cracked now, but overall I would assume they're probably not looking too hot, which I do think is a shame. I think Infernalist is probably one of the cooler ascendancies in the game, if not the coolest, at least in the original game, due to demon form. And I think nerfing it's kind of lame, but you know, such is life, boys. One last thing that I wanted to mention before I cap this video off is for all the builds that got nerfed and all of the characters that seem like they're gonna be very bad, one of the things that I would maybe kind of give you a little bit of hope with is they added over 100 new unique items, and uniques can really be build enabling. You can pivot on them, they can do a ton. It really just depends on what they added. Now, am I holding my breath for after they have absolutely annihilated everything to give you something to pull you out? Probably not, but I would keep my eyes open for all of the uniques and all their different effects, because the reality of it is that they might be able to turn a bad build into at least a solid build, or in some cases they might just make something that's totally shit into something that's really good. So I would not doom too hard, and I would definitely look for the new uniques as kind of a lifeline to save a character that you really wanted to play, but maybe it's not good enough now. I think this is going to be your best bet. But alright guys, I think that's all for this video. Of course there's a lot more that I could talk about, but I don't want to like get into the weeds of like, oh, and quiver effect is not going to be that great and this isn't going to be that bad. I just kind of want to give my general approach to what I'm thinking with all the different ascendancies to kind of help you guys out to make a specific choice. I think I'll do one more video before we have the league launch, and in that case I will see you guys then. Deuces.